Ladies and gents, Tyson Popplestone here. This is the Relaxed Running Podcast. Welcome. Glad to have you guys here and really excited to introduce to you for the first time on the Relaxed Running Podcast today, Matt Fitzgerald. He's coming at us out of California at the moment, though he's getting ready for a big move to create one of his dreams, a little running hub for anyone who wants to go and train in northern Arizona. So I know that you guys are going to be excited about that. Some of you will. Some of you running nerds are going to love it. I know you're going to hit him up after that. Matt Fitzgerald is a really prominent, prolific author in the world of distance running. He's written a whole heap of books. I honestly don't even know how many. His name has been on my mind for a long time as a guy that I'd like to invite onto the show, and he was good enough to do it. Today we speak about one of his books, The Comeback Quotient. Comeback Quotient, it's all about the struggles, the challenges that every athlete, whether brand new to the sport or whether competing at the highest level, have to go through. We all inevitably hit a hurdle that we have to try and find our way back from. What is it that successful athletes do that the rest of us are not doing in these moments? Why do some people push through and create for themselves like a little Rocky story where others say, okay, you know what, I think my time in this sport is done. That's what we covered today. It was a really, really interesting conversation. I'm excited to have this guy back again. Before you listen to it, just a reminder, anything that you need in the world of distance running, whether that's training programs for distance running or for triathlon or running-based sports, check it out over at relaxedrunning.com. But for now, let me introduce to you and to the Relaxed Running Podcast, Matt Fitzgerald. I was thinking before I hit record about what I was most interested in, what I thought the audience of mine would be most interested in. And from what I can tell, a lot of the audience is relatively new to the sport of distance running. They're here looking for guidance from, experts in the industry. And I'm often answering questions around pacing, and I'm often answering questions around setbacks. And with that said, I thought, well, you're the perfect man for the job because you've got a book on both of those topics.
Yeah.
I was curious to see if you were happy to have a little bit of a chat to kick the conversation off around elements of a comeback that we can really invest in. Because
yes,
this is something that I've seen you've spoken about at depth, something that all of us at some stage struggle with. So that's where I was thinking we could take the conversation. But before any of that, maybe you could take the floor for a minute and just introduce yourself and let the audience know a bit about who you are and what your passion in the sport is.
Sure. Yeah, I started running when I was 11 years old. I'm 51 now, so that's a long time ago. And it's funny, I was inspired to start running by my father, who ran his first marathon when I was 11. My dad is also a writer. And so I think I got both the running and the writing from him. And growing up, I was passionate about both. I didn't necessarily anticipate, bringing them together professionally, but that's the way things worked out. A couple of years after I finished college, I got a job with a new startup endurance sports magazine. And that first break, just it was the only door I needed open. Like I discovered what I wanted to do with the rest of my career. Got into coaching not too long after that, and then fast forwarding a little bit further, created a business. I'm like the world's least likely entrepreneur, but one thing led to another, and I created an online training business for endurance athletes called 80/20 Endurance. I'm coming at you from California, but I'm actually in the process of moving. So within a few weeks, I will be based in Flagstaff, Arizona.
Beautiful.
Yep.
That'll be a nice little change up. Is that a lifestyle change? Is that for running, combination of both?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I spent a summer there in 2017. I embedded myself with a team of professional runners there. So at the time, I was 46 years old. I had never been a professional runner. I just wasn't that good, even when I was younger. But I was able to pull some strings and convince the coach of a professional running team, Northern Arizona Elite, to allow me to spend 13 weeks with the team, just doing everything they do, just to find out what's possible for a middle-aged, recreational runner if they just, completely like do everything right, like the pros do. And it was just an amazing experience. But in the process, fell in love with Flagstaff. It's just a runner's paradise. So I've been kind of looking for ways to get back ever since then, and came up with one. Actually, what I want to do is it was such a magical experience I had that summer that I wrote a book about it, so I was able to kind of share it with other runners in that way. But I really want to make the thing itself available to other runners. So the home that my wife and I are buying, we're going to turn it into like the ultimate runner's retreat, and actually open our doors to runners who want to come stay. Awesome. There'll be four other bedrooms, so not a lot of space, but it's basically come one, come all, and I'm doing it in affiliation with the same professional running team that I was embedded with. So like all the same, just amazing opportunities I had, other runners will have beginning next spring is when I hope to launch it.
I can tell you there would have been plenty of Australian running ears that just pricked up then, because I know for us as well, it's a real hotbed. It's a real training. It's like the Mecca for so many athletes in the distance running world. What year did you say that you first went down to Flagstaff to run with the group?
2017.
2017. That might be a bit after. One of my good friends, I'm not sure if you know the Australian runner, Dave McNeil. He's I think he's run 13:10 for 5,000 meters. Like he's run at a couple of Olympics. He was based there for quite a few years. And I think that was my first introduction to the place, just through following his progress. And you've got a little bit of altitude there as well, don't you? You're running around with a little bit thinner air.
Yeah. It's more than a little altitude. It's pretty high up. And that was a first for me. I had traveled to altitude and, run 1, 2, 3 days at high elevation. But, this was my first exposure to, concentrated altitude training. And it's not everyone responds well to it. There's a reason, runners seek it out, but you're rolling the dice a little bit in terms of how it affects you individually. But I luckily responded very well to it.
Yeah, beautiful. Over here, I'm not sure what it is in feet, but I think our highest training point in Australia is Falls Creek, and I think it might be around 1,600 meters, which is nothing too crazy. But even there, I know for a month over sort of the December, January period, a lot of Australia's elite runners go and do some of their longer aerobic work there. And even then, they'll still drive down the mountain, a couple of thousand meters, a couple of thousand feet at least, to hit their track workouts to make sure they're still busting out some intensity. So I've never personally done a whole heap of altitude work, but I've followed the scene here pretty closely, and it's one that really fascinates me. So with your online coaching platform, is that what you're doing mostly? Are you mostly writing training programs for people? Because obviously we'll get into a bit more depth around the areas of expertise that you've written your books and things on, but what's the foundation of the coaching that you're doing?
Yeah, I coach in, I guess, I see myself as having three distinct roles with a lot of overlap. One is, running an online business, which is, it's training resources delivered, to the masses, through that platform. And it's not just runners, it's all endurance athletes. So we cater to, cyclists, triathletes, swimmers, obstacle course racers as well. And it's really cool. It's a lot of fun. It's way bigger than I ever could have imagined it would be when I started off. So that is, that's a lot of fun. Like I build a lot of the training content for it. But I still love coaching one-on-one, and we don't do that. There's a fair amount of one-on-one interaction, but because I'm busy and I have my fingers in a few different pies, I limit my one-on-one coaching to 5 athletes at a time. Usually a mixture of runners and triathletes, and that's like that. That's the maximum number I can give the attention that it's not fun for me any other way than to really be all in and provide, just a high level of service to athletes and, develop a relationship. And then the third bucket would be my writing. That really is my first passion. I still think of it as the only thing I'm any good at. And I'm just full of ideas. Like I always have things I want to write about. So that, not a day goes by without me scribbling a little something.
Is that right? You're carrying your notebook around with you with all the ideas flooding through your mind?
Yeah. It's the worst when they happen at night and you won't remember it in the morning. And so you have to get up and, punch it into your phone or something. But
it's funny. It sounds like me. I do outside of the running world. I've got a similar setup to you by the sounds of things with the online running coaching element, but the notebook element for me. I do a lot of stand-up comedy here in Victoria. Okay. Yeah, and the notebook is a constant with me because I know the frustration of waking up in the middle of the night and having an idea that you think's funny, and then go, no, I'll remember that one, and then waking up a few hours later and going, I have absolutely no idea what that idea was going to be. But man, it's really interesting. It's a great introduction, and I totally understand that idea of working with 5 athletes because, as you say, your time's limited, and to be able to offer quality programs, it's a bit hard when you get out into sort of double figures and beyond. But I started the conversation with sort of the finger pointing towards this direction of the conversation around a comeback, because as I sort of set the foundation with whether you're brand new to the sport or you've been involved for a couple of years, eventually the moment comes where you're going to have to deal with a setback, an injury, poor form, or whatever it is that you're trying to navigate your way through. It's just part of the package, unfortunately. And I can only guess that the interest in that topic would have come from personal experience. Is that right?
Yeah, very, very much so. The way I frame it is that, it's never perfect in this sport. Like there's, even when things are going well, they're not perfect. And so for me, a setback is really just, it's different in degree, but not in type, or, it's quantitatively versus qualitatively different from any other time. Like you're always running up against some kind of challenge. So, I would say, some athletes have more setbacks than others, like, the big ones, and some have bigger setbacks than others. But regardless, you are facing challenges constantly, and you need to have a toolkit in place for navigating challenges, whether it's like things are close to perfect and you just want to, you're still not content and you want them to be perfect, or they've really gone off the rails and it's like, you're just trying to keep your head above water as a runner. So it's, I view it, I do this as a coach too. I tell athletes, it's like, for me, it's all the same. Like I'm focused on problems. There's always something we can work on. But you need to have those tools, whether it's going well or not so well.
Yeah, it's obviously it's a nuanced kind of a conversation, because with any kind of setback, it's not just the physical injury or insert whatever the frustration is. It's that mental side of that return to the sport as well, that return to top form. And I'm always interested to hear about mental strategies and just some practical tools that you can apply to a situation like that to help you navigate your way through. Is there sort of core principles that you teach in and around this subject that you give people to help focus on? And obviously I'll link your books and things for those who are interested in hearing more about it. But as a way of introduction to the topic itself, how do you navigate either yourself or the athletes that you're working with through a period like that?
Yeah, I have a very consistent orientation toward, all facets of, coaching runners and other endurance athletes, whether it's the training component, the nutrition component, or the mental component. I'm a big believer in identifying and emulating proven best practices. So, I love science. I pay a lot of attention to, relevant science in this domain, but I always, my first focus of attention is always the elites, the best in the world. Like, what are they doing? And so my book, The Comeback Quotient, is really about that. I look for, everyone's unique, everyone's different, but there are commonalities. You can only get to the top by doing certain things right, by not breaking some unbreakable rules. And so with the comeback quotient, I just studied. I do what I always do, whatever the subject matter. I studied, just amazing comebacks that endurance athletes have achieved, and just sort of broke them down and looked for, okay, is there anything that they're all doing? Because on the surface, they look extremely different. In the book, I talk about everything from Kenyan runner Jeffrey Kamworor slipping and falling on the start line of the World Half Marathon Championship in 2016 and getting trampled by dozens of runners behind him, and then having to get up and salvage his race. He ended up winning that race. So that's one kind of setback. I talk about another athlete, an elite off-road triathlete from back in the 90s, Jamie Whitmore, who developed a cancerous tumor in her her buttock, and it just it almost killed her, and the surgeries required to remove it. She had to have a lot of muscle removed as well. So she ended up coming back as a Paralympic cyclist. So her professional, elite triathlon career was over, but she came all the way back in a completely different sport. So I think she's the only athlete I know of who was a world champion in one endurance sport and a Paralympic gold medalist in another sport. So on the surface, that looks absolutely nothing like Kamworor, falling and getting trampled. But underneath, I did find commonalities that they're all really doing the same thing. And I'll just, very quickly, to tie a bow on this, we can dig deeper if you like. What they're all doing is, as I put it, like fully facing the reality they're presented with, which is kind of a 3-step process. First, you have to accept it. Like, you have to accept what is happening, because you can't start to solve it if you just get stuck in the mode of wishing it hadn't happened, or boo-hooing, or feeling sorry for yourself. Once you accept it, you have to then embrace it. Embrace it doesn't mean you try to convince yourself you're glad you fell on the start line or got cancer. Of course not. Embracing it means you commit to making the best of it regardless. So you're just pivoting and saying, all right, this isn't what I wanted, but I'm still going to make the best of the situation, even if my original goal is unattainable because of events. And then the third and final step in the process is addressing the reality. And that means just doing everything in your power to achieve that best possible outcome. And that requires both effort and judgment. The effort is the obvious part. You have to try really, really hard. Everyone knows that. But if you look at the great athletes, when they pull off these amazing comebacks, it's not just grit and resilience. It's every bit as much being smart and keeping their heads and making really good decisions.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I love that it starts with an acceptance of the fact that it's happened, because I notice even with my own life, whenever there's something that's going against me or it's going the opposite direction to what I was anticipating, the first reaction, obviously, in many is to try and reject it, is to be like, no, it's not happening. Yep. And with that, I speak for myself, but I know I speak for a lot of others. There's a huge element of tension that comes through your body when you realize that things aren't going as you're expecting them to go. And until you can deal with that tension, especially in a physically taxing sport like distance running or any endurance sport, it's going to be really difficult to use your energy effectively. You're trying to operate in a state of rejection. So what was the process of you discovering this? Was this just looking at a whole range of athletes and just getting that famous notebook of yours out and really just trying to write down the commonalities and unpack what these athletes are doing so well? Because the beauty with a book like that is, as we've touched on, there's endless amounts of people who can leave you with these examples, but they're obviously two really huge examples on a world scale of what is capable. But it's a cool, simple, broken down idea of what's taking place there. But I know that, like so many ideas that eventually get presented simply, it doesn't start off that way. So yeah, what was the process of discovery like that for you?
Yeah, I sort of make it sound like I'm, a scientist and went about it scientifically, but I'm not a scientist, and that's not my method. So the way, those ideas coalesced in my mind was, I occupy kind of a unique position in endurance sports where I coach almost exclusively amateur athletes. So, people who are not, making their living through their race performances, just everyday folks who have a passion for running or whatever. But I interact with a lot of world-class endurance athletes and really get to know them, a lot of them, on a very human level. And it's just interesting when you have one foot in each of these realms, you start to notice differences. And it's not that all recreational athletes are one way and all elite athletes are another way, but there are clear patterns, and you start to see why the elites are elite. So it was just through this experience, and also as an athlete myself, I when I say that I believe in emulating best practices, well, I'm the first person to do that, before anyone I coach. Like that's what I'm doing, to benefit my own athletic pursuits. So it was just, I started to notice that, an elite athlete for whom, something catastrophically goes wrong, they're just so quick to pivot from problem focus to solution focus. So everyone has that, what I call oh shit moment. Like that's just human nature. Like when it goes wrong, you're not happy about it. You're often taken off guard. So you're shocked, you're disappointed. Everyone experiences that, but the elites are really, really quick to just say, oh, well, whatever, this was the hand I was dealt. And then they move on to those other steps. And I see so many recreational athletes who just get stuck in focusing on the problem. Like, oh, why did this have to happen to me? Like it's ruined. My goal is out the window. It's like, snap out of it. Like it's understandable. So that's really where it all started. And so when I started like a formal research process, I kind of already knew what I was looking for. And so I just kind of immersed myself. There's always an evolution. I think I know what I'm talking about, and then I do the deep research, and things change. But I wasn't going in completely blind and just studying a bunch of case studies and having to invent a theory whole cloth.
Yeah. Yeah. So with the three principles, obviously, I might take up your offer and dig a little deeper into them because they're really interesting, and it'd be nice to unpack them a little bit and see how that plays out, because obviously the practical application of something like that is incredibly beneficial to athletes at all levels. But when it gets to, well, we'll go through it. When you say like the accident or the frustration or whatever you want to say has taken place, and that moment of acceptance has to come, what does that first process look like? Is there a way that you break that down and show people how to do it, or help people take steps towards doing it?
Yeah. The first step is really, there's this concept of in psychology known as metacognition, and it's a big fancy word that basically just means thinking about thinking or thinking about feeling. So we're all constantly thinking and feeling, but we're not always stepping back from our own thoughts and emotions. And that is that's foundational. Like we're all capable of metacognition, but there's actually research showing that elite athletes do more of it and do it in more effective ways. And so that's key, because often when something goes wrong, it's stressful, and it can feel like, and actually sometimes be, a kind of crisis. And in sort of critical moments like that, it's easy to be kind of swallowed up by the experience. Like, not to be overly dramatic, but the analogy I make is like, a drowning man doesn't make shopping lists. Like if you're in the process of drowning, that is the only thing you're thinking about. And so in that first moment when stuff goes wrong, that's sort of it's easy to slip into that mindset where you're very reactive. And the trouble with that is when you're not able to step back from your own thoughts and emotions and actions, I should say, then you have no freedom to make choices. You're simply like a crude stimulus response mechanism, and you're just doing what your emotions tell you to do. But when you're able to just sort of train yourself to, like, again, everyone has the oh shit moment, but how quickly can you realize, okay, something went wrong, and now let's back up, and because you always have options. So often it doesn't feel like it. And in the worst situations, your only option is to change your attitude, versus the situation itself. But even that is still freedom that can never be taken away from you. So that's really the first thing I encourage athletes to do, is like get in the habit. And it's easier said than done, like if you don't do it naturally. But and a helpful way to really kind of get a foothold in that is treat negative emotions like pain. Like if you're out running and you just get like a sharp, sudden jolt in your knee, that gets your attention. You immediately interpret it as a problem, and you start thinking about, okay, what just happened? What caused it? What do I do about it? Do I stop running? Do I rub it? You should treat negative emotions the same way, because that's really they're very much parallel to pain. It's a signal that you're not happy about something. So whether it's like, it could be disappointment, it could be anger, it could be grief, a whole list of things. Like that's your first signal. So because that's your opportunity to make that sort of metacognitive leap. It's like an alarm going off. Okay, like I'm suddenly just feeling bitter. What's that about? And then you start to evaluate. Okay, well, my bitterness is coming from this, and I could do X, Y, or Z about it, and which path is best.
Yeah, I spent a little bit of time listening to, I'm not sure if you've heard of a guy called Dr. Daniel Amen. I'm not 100% sure of his official title, but he works closely with brain research. And one of the big topics in psychology that he speaks about, or one of the big topics that he deals with when it comes to developing your brain health, is exactly what you've just spoken about. Mm-hmm. And he refers to it as squashing ants. And by ants, he means automatic negative thoughts, just as a nice little acronym. And the way that he explains doing that is exactly what you've broken down. And he says that, first of all, you're going to notice when you start paying attention to it, that every now and then a little ant will creep in. And he said, and a lot of people just learn to live with ants. They go, okay, well, I guess this is just the way the house is. Right. I can make do with it. And before you know it, there's an infestation that's sort of overridden their whole life. He says what you need to do, and the strategy that I use, and probably need to do it more consistently, is just with a double column in my little notebook. I'll write down the ant. I'll write down whatever the frustration or the thought was that set off the emotion. And then on the flip side of it, I'll try and write down a couple of just as reasonable or, just as likely alternative ways to view that situation. It always amazes me that when you open up the options to how you can view a situation, either, positive or in this instance, more likely negative, how many other ways there are to view it. And I think when it comes to acceptance, that's a really helpful step that I've found to use, because it quite quickly changes the emotion around, whatever's causing the upset. So that's a really helpful one. That's really good. Have you got tools when it comes to the acceptance stage of it? Because you're right. I look at top athletes, and it often amazes me how many elite athletes, especially in the distance running scene, this isn't universal because there's some strong exceptions, are very laid back.
Yes.
Australia's best distance runner, a friend of mine, Stewie McSwain, he's a 12:56 man, and he's the most relaxed guy you've ever met. Nothing bothers him. He was training with Nick Badeau's group here in Melbourne a while ago, and I was talking with another member of the Melbourne track squad, and he was saying that on the day I think it was a couple of weeks before they went away to the World Champs a few years ago, and they were going down to have a final session, a big time trial, just as a real last blowout, before race day. And they went down there, and there was a little athletics group who were just doing like a trophy award ceremony, and they were taking up the whole track. And one of the guys said, yeah, it was really frustrating to the whole group because we had our mindset on this race, on this time trial. And Stewie was like, It's we'll just do it. We'll do it later, I guess. Like we'll just.
Yeah.
It was just a genuine. He didn't care. He just learned
Yep.
to live with it, and I noticed that a lot. Whereas I think back in the day, I would have had more of the tendency to go, "Bloody, this is like, don't you know what I'm training for? Don't you know how fast I am? This is
Right.
this is my time. You're 12."
Yeah.
It's it's really interesting to notice that, but I love just knowing the processes that people are going through to get themselves to that particular mindset. What are you using?
Yeah, that is part of the reason I use narrative so much in, well, a lot of my books, but in the Comeback Quotient in particular. I wanted readers to see a lot of examples of what this looks like, and just undeniable proof that things that don't seem possible are very much possible because people are doing them. And you know, for my, I have this term, I call it benign shaming, which is like when you look, like it's the what's my excuse mindset. When you look at, because like these people aren't superheroes. They're flesh and blood human beings, with a lot of talent, but that's the only difference, really. They're just like us. And when you see them, not freaking out when something seriously goes wrong, and just being, smart and resilient, and patient, it shows you, like, it takes away any excuse. It's like, it's so easy to pretend, well, anyone would react this way in my position. No. So I find it very helpful just to, it's really what I did with myself. Like when I saw how the best athletes handled adversity, I use it to sort of create like a vision for the athlete I want to be. That's an exercise I do with a journaling exercise I do with a lot of the athletes I coach. As I say, like, just sit down and describe who you want to be. Like, what does it mean to compete as the best version of yourself? And you can inform that with, stories, examples of great athletes whom you admire. It's like, well, if so-and-so handled this type of setback in this way, and you admire that, would you like to also be capable of reacting in the same way in a similar situation? And then once you have sort of like this clear vision of, like, the you want to be, then you can, it's something to fall back on when, because these things always come by surprise, almost always comes by surprise, and so, like, they do catch you off guard. So, but like when you have this sort of vision, or this, these role models that you've collected, they give you sort of it's almost like a life raft. It's like, okay, I'm drowning, but there's a life raft. So, like, what would so and so do in this situation?
Yeah, it's really helpful. It reminds me of when I'm on a plane and we hit bad turbulence. I always look at the flight attendants for comfort. If they're not panicked, if they're not panicked, I'm not going to be too panicked.
Why should I be?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And then we come into the embrace factor. Do you want to unpack that one a little for us?
Yeah. I think everyone, they have this expression in Australia as well, I'm sure. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And it's, it's a cliche, but that's actually exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about fully embracing reality. In a bad situation, it's like, first you have to accept that you can't deny it. Like, they're lemons, you have them. You didn't want lemons, you wanted apples, but you got lemons. Like, deal with it. Yeah. And then, so embracing is really, that's when you say, you know what? I didn't want lemons. I don't like lemons, but I do know you can make lemonade out of lemons. And I like that. Like, it's not easy. I don't know how. I'm going to have to wing it. So that's what embracing means. It is really that pivot to, making the best of the situation. And, an example I give, I don't think it's in that book, but elsewhere, was something that happened to me. I was training for an Ironman triathlon, and I was about 6 weeks out from the race. I was really firing. Like, I was dialed in. I was getting fit, and I strained a muscle in my chest wall swimming. And I could not swim for 2 weeks. I could not raise my left arm overhead for 2 weeks, which is not so good for swimming. And, that's a situation where like a younger me would have had trouble, because like that's a really tough time to get a gut punch. It's like, the race is close. Things have been going well. You're excited. You're having visions of what you're capable of. And then boom, it's like, wow, doctor says 2 weeks, don't lift your arm overhead. And so, but at this time I was actually working on this book when it happened. So I'm like, well, time to walk the talk, Matt. And so I'm like, okay, what would, I call these athletes ultra realists, the ones who are masters at fully facing reality. So I said, Matt, what would an ultra realist do in this situation? So I first of all, like one thing that I did that I would recommend that everyone do is like make no assumptions, because we're very quick to say, oh, well, there goes my goal. Like it's out the window. Well, do you know that? I mean, it might be. That's one. Number two is like how proud of myself will I be if, in the 6 weeks remaining to this race with this, there's the setback, there's 6 weeks, and then there's the race. How proud of myself will I be if I handle this like a champ? Very proud. Like, and so it's helpful. Like, don't assume your goal is out the window, but also realize, oh wait, there's still a way to succeed that is completely independent. Because if the goal is impossible to achieve because of the setback, well, I mean, you can't, nobody can do the impossible. I refer to it as shaking your fist at the rain. Like, what the hell sense does that make? Like, it's raining, it's raining. It just is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know you had a picnic plan today, but it's raining. Like you're not getting anything accomplished by standing outside shaking your fist at the clouds. So yeah, make no assumptions, but also realize like honestly, like the races you feel best about usually are the ones where it's not like you PR or win. It's when you compete as the best version of yourself. Like those are often the best. The experiences you look back on most fondly. So that opportunity is never taken away from you in these moments. So I sort of like, and that's what I mean when I say embrace. I mean embrace. You're really saying, you know what, this sucks, but I'm like, now this is the challenge. Now, like I'm not going to be defeated by this setback, and you can take a kind of pride in that, where it really helps you keep your morale up, because it's really easy to lose morale. It's like, well, my goal was to qualify for the world championship and I probably won't now. Okay, whatever, So just keep the energy up, the enthusiasm up to continue training hard. It helps to define success in a way where you still have the possibility to succeed. And then the third thing is, and this really gets into, from embracing to addressing, is like, okay, like, what do you actually do? So, for me, like, the doctor said, well, you can't swim for 2 weeks. I'm like, I'm not so sure about that. So I went to the pool and I swam with one arm. And I'm like, who says I can't? And I did a lot of kick sets. And what I started to tell myself, because I'm actually not a terribly strong swimmer. That's my weak event in triathlon. So I told myself, you know what, this could be a blessing in disguise. This could be an opportunity, because like I'll still have 4 weeks, assuming I recover. If I don't, get too greedy and try to come back too quickly, I'll have 4 weeks to swim with both arms, and I can use those 2 weeks to work on some weaknesses in my swimming, like breathing to my right side. I wasn't good at, and it's really helpful. When things are going well, you get lazy. Oh, I'll just keep breathing to my left because like it's easier. Well, now I'm like, this is an opportunity to work on that weakness. I also have a weak flutter kick. So all those kick sets I did, I improved so much in my kicking, because that's all I was doing. I was just going to the pool and kick, one arm. And so that's part of it as well. You can get resourceful and creative in these moments. And like, if you're just, stuck in disillusionment, you don't discover all these ways. It's what golfers call scrambling, like when you hit an errant tee shot And then you have to, get up and down from a place you never would choose for your ball to land, like between two trees, behind a rock. It's like you have to scramble. It's like, well, that's where the ball is. That is where you have to hit your next shot from. And the Tiger Woodses of the world, like, why was he great? Because he was an incredible scrambler. It's like, doesn't matter where the ball is.
I was just thinking about Tiger Woods as you gave that example. Perhaps no surprise as a golfing example, but I watched a documentary. I wish I could tell you what it was a little while ago, and I think it was maybe about his comeback trail after sort of everything in his life just unraveled, and he came back and his form wasn't super hot, and he was getting back into it, but he was starting to find like a little bit more rhythm, and it followed him through one of the major championships, and I'm not sure how far in he was, but he was well and truly down. And his caddy or one of the members that were with him was saying, Tiger, like, let's just stay focused. We could still finish in the top 10. And the camera was on him and he stops and he looked at this guy. He's like, I'm going to win. Like, you've just set me off. I'll win. And he did. And I know that's like the pinnacle of the example of what you're speaking about and sort of the cream of the crop of the elite athletes who have this ability to not only scramble, but really, really unscramble as well, which is good. And what's funny is, I'm sure you recognize this, but I notice in every person, there's such a huge respect and appreciation for a comeback story. Like you look at the Rocky movies and you go, okay, well, the inspiration with this story is he wasn't supposed to win. He's not supposed to be the champ. And somehow he battled his way through. But I always say it's everyone loves a Rocky story once it's written, but as it's being written, it's the most frustrating, difficult, disappointing time, which, as you say, becomes the real challenge. And I think that's a great point that you've made, is just recognizing that that's the new challenge and addressing it, going to the pool with one arm and swimming. And it's funny when you said that, I just pictured you swimming around in circles, but I'm glad you had those leg kicks going well as well. Now, it makes a lot of sense. And I guess for anyone listening, as I've sort of touched on a few times now, like we often feel as though we're unique, we're there by ourselves in those situations. But as you and I have said, just in sort of 40 minutes worth of conversation, it's a fairly universal principle. And I think you've touched on a hot subject. I'll tag I'll put the comeback quotient in the show notes for anyone who wants to tap into that a little bit more. But on more of a personal level, and to step away from that particular topic, what are you working at the moment? You sound like the kind of guy who's always got a little project on the run from just the mention of the notebooks and the ideas going through your mind.
Yeah, this is true. The project I'm most excited about right now is I keep using foul language. I hope that's okay. But
no, go for it. Okay. You're in good company.
Okay, I figured. Yeah, you're an Aussie. You're a stand-up comedian. You
really hard to offend.
Yeah, but the title of this book I'm working on, it's for anyone listening who has read How Bad Do You Want It? Another book of mine. It's in that vein, and this one is called Screw Loose, Shit Together, and the subtitle is A Theory of Athletic Greatness. So it's very similar. It's based on my observation. I'm not a psychologist, but I'm very, very interested in psychology, especially as it relates to sport. And I study the minds of great athletes. And one thing I've noticed again and again, and they talk about themselves in this way. So this is not me calling, great athletes crazy. They call themselves that, or like, I'm addicted. Like I have an addictive personality. Like that is part of my formula. But they have this two-sided nature where it's like, it's almost two opposite qualities that you wouldn't think could coexist in the same people. Like they've got a screw loose in the sense, not that they're, diagnosed with a mental illness, but that they're unbalanced in some way. And that's where, like, they don't want to win, they need to win. And if you look at the examples, like, where does that come from? It runs really deep in their psychology. Like, sometimes it's like, sort of hard, genetic hardwiring. Often it's traumatic early life experience, where they just like, they are going to outwork you. They're going to outsuffer you because they need to, because they can't help it. And so they're a little bit psycho, but at the same time, they have their shit together. And, the proper psychological term for it is self-regulation. They're masters at self-regulating, not in every context. Like self-regulation is just how we control our thoughts, feelings, and actions in pursuit of goals. So when are we not doing that, right? But they might not be the best at self-regulating in like romantic relationships, but in the sporting context, they just have an incredible ability to, think, feel, and do helpful things in pursuit of winning and to avoid doing harmful things. So it's just fascinating to me because I've bounced this theory off of champion athletes and they're like, yeah, you are describing me. And for this one, I actually did, like I said, I'm not a scientist, but I teamed up with a couple real scientists to conduct. This is the first actual study I've ever been involved in. We took a bunch of elite runners and put them through a standardized personality profile to try and figure out like which personality traits map to these screw loose and shit together qualities. So that was a lot of fun.
Did you have any of the data back yet that you're allowed to speak about? Is there any real commonalities between the athlete personality types and success in the world of elite sport?
Oh yeah. Yes, absolutely. It varies a little bit by sport. Like, so it's like, champions in individual sports are not quite the same as champions in team sports, which makes sense. Right. Women tend to be a little bit different from men in some of the characteristics, but there are some that you see again and again and again in across the spectrum. And so the shit together side maps to one of the big five personality traits, conscientiousness. So that is one you see them scoring very, very high for conscientiousness. Often they score very high for the trait of prudence. So that, again, you can see like that. Okay, that's sort of a shit together quality. Like prudence is just like knowing when to quit. Like, honestly, I told you about, my experience with the professional runners in Flagstaff, Arizona. So it's like 13 real elite runners that I was surrounded by for 13 weeks. I never saw so many athletes bail out of workouts. Like they quit way more often than recreational runners do. Yeah. Why? Prudence. They're like, I have nothing to prove. It's dumb for me to finish this workout. Their ego wasn't going to take a hit. They were just smart. So those are the sum on the screw loose, no shit together side. On the screw loose side, some of the personality traits, the big ones, and these are almost universal. Competitiveness, but I mean, like, but it makes sense, right? Because like past a certain point, competitiveness starts to look a little crazy. You know what I mean? Like when people are just like they gotta win everything all the time, and you look at the stories of truly great, not just elite, but great athletes.
Yeah. Prefontaine back there, great example.
Yeah, exactly. So that like ultra competitive, and then boldness is another. It's it's just like some of these terms like we don't use in common language, but they're well known to personality psychologists. So boldness is just like it's Tiger Woods saying, "What the hell are you talking about? Top 10? Like I'm gonna win." It's like, Tiger, there's only 8 holes left and you're in 19th. It's like that's boldness. It's just like you look at them like you're nuts. Yeah. And then they go out and do it.
Yeah, it's incredible. That's good. I prefer your term over, what was it?
Self-regulation.
Self-regulation. Nah, screw loose shit together is a much better scientific term in my opinion. It's something that's really noticeable. I noticed this with a lot of top athletes, and a great example of this at the moment would be Jakob Ingebrigtsen. Just currently, he's the kind of guy that when he's on the start line of any race, he's going to be incredibly, incredibly hard to beat because he seems to have this, well, not only incredible talent, but this incredible ability just to be able to rock up. And I would have put Matt Centrowitz in this category up until sort of the 2016 Olympics. You knew that every time he was on the start line, he's going to be in the top couple. He just knew how to race. Nick Willis. There's some great examples of athletes who just continually rock up at major championships and seem to have this ability. And as you say, you have no idea what the outside of their life might look like. And Tiger Woods, I guess, is a classic example of that, where just because you can keep your shit together on the golf course doesn't mean your shit's together everywhere else. And it's a really interesting observation and something that's really true. But It's amazing how many athletes do have that capacity to just flick that switch and make sure come game day they're ready to roll. So this is a new book that you're putting together.
Yeah, it'll be out sometime next year. I'm sort of taking my time with it. I want it to be as good as I can possibly make it, which is, I guess, true of everything. But sometimes I feel like because I have so many ideas, like I get it like 95% as good as I can make it, and then I'm like, I'm on to the next thing. I don't want to do that with this one. It won't be perfect because I'm not a good enough writer to make it perfect, but I want it to be like as good as I can possibly make it. So I've been working at it for a while, and it'll be out 6 to 9 months from now.
Awesome. How do you structure your writing? Is that almost like a training regime for you? Do you have structured parts of your day where you dedicate that to the actual writing?
Yeah, I think most writers are really creatures of habit, as are most serious athletes, right? Like, it's just like your routine is your routine, and like, you're you're poking the bear if you mess with our routine. And so, yeah, for me, because there's so many parallels actually between the writing life and the endurance sports life. Like, so much of it is rhythm. For me, I was always very injury prone. And so it was a struggle for me to get in a rhythm as an athlete. It's just like, okay, as soon as like me pulling or, straining my chest in the swim 6 weeks out from Ironman, like that's classic Matt right there. But like magic happens when you get in a flow with your, like I've had periods when I'm healthy, and I ran my fastest marathon at the end of that fake pro runner stint in Flagstaff at 46, and it was like my 50th marathon. I hadn't come within 9 minutes of that time in 9 years, and it was partly because what the pros do work, but partly because I was healthy and I was able to get into a rhythm. And writing is the same thing. Like, every day looks about the same for me, and I like it that way. Like, it looks boring from the camera's view, but like there's a party going on inside my head. It's like, like, my wife would tell you, like, she's a little bit bored by me, but
my wife would say the same thing about me. I definitely appreciate that from the comedy writing perspective. I like the way you put it. There's definitely a party going on in my head as well. Is it just running that you're writing about, or are you writing about other topics as well?
Yeah, I don't. When I was younger, I tried my hand at, much younger, at different things. But honestly, like, growing up, I did not. I had big ambitions as a writer, because my dad was a successful novelist. And I'm like, that is sexy. Like, I want to be like, I want to do that. And so when I landed that first job I mentioned in sports writing, I liked it, but I almost viewed it as slumming it. And so I always was working on my own stuff. Like, okay, like I pay the bills and have fun writing about running, endurance sports, but I was always working on something else. But that something else never panned out, and it was because it wasn't all that good. And it took me a while to realize, it's like, wait a minute, like, who says you can't write great stuff about sports? Like, who says you can't put everything you have to offer creatively into something that just happens to be about sports? And like, when I had that epiphany, I was all in. It's like, this is what I know. They say, write about what you know. So, my books are, most of them, they really are about more than sport, when it comes down to it. They're just like, sport is like the entry point. So I feel like I have the best of both worlds. I can just, come up with something and no one can stop me. I'm just going to write it.
That's awesome, man. Before I let you go, are there any particular writers that you really enjoy reading, like in either the world of sport and running and beyond?
Well, I'll tell you who I was probably most influenced by as a writer, and this is going to be like out of left field, but it's the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Because like his writing, like, he's thought of as a philosopher, but I think he's one of the greatest prose writers who ever lived. And it's like, you could just like take one of his books, open up to a random page, and like throw a dart at it, and then just put whatever sentence it lands on a t-shirt, and it would be fantastic. Like that's like everything he wrote, every sentence was epigrammatical.
Yeah.
And so like that level of like, it's like there's this density to it, because like he doesn't write like anyone could read him. Like, you know, if you don't read German, you have to read it in English or whatever. But just like every sentence is like a bumper sticker slogan, just like this is just taut, muscular, just sentences you can just chew on. So I will never be the next Nietzsche, but like he's like the one who has sort of influenced the way I try to write. Because I was an English major in college, and you learn how to write. You learn how to overwrite. When you study, when you get your degree in English, and so I had to like Nietzsche help me like get over myself in terms of like trying to show off with my writing. It's just like, no, just knock them in the jaw with your sentences.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That was a good time. That was really fun for me, and I'm super grateful that you made the time to come on, and would love to have you back again in the future. Maybe when your next book comes out, or before then, if you're interested. It'd be nice to touch base and talk about one of your other books, because you certainly got enough to fill up half a bookshelf, which is a great thing for, as you say, not just runners but those interested in the psychology of elite sport. So thanks so much for what you're putting out there, man, and thanks even more for jumping on board today.
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to you, and happy to come back anytime.
Awesome. I'll leave you to it. I'll see you soon. See you later, everybody.